Welcome back to the MOOC course on qualitative research methods. My name is Aradhana Malik and I'm helping you with this course. We were talking about understanding social programs through evaluation. So we did a few things and I'm just going to go through them. If you can just focus on this. Yeah, we were talking about these and we talked about what social program evaluators do. We did all of this, we talked about different paradigms from which we approach social program evaluation. So I'll just, so we talked about the different paradigms. We talked about post-positivism, we talked about utilitarian pragmatism, we talked about interpretivism and constructivism, we talked about critical social sciences. Now let's try and finish this discussion. We'll discuss the logic of justification for evaluations that are conducted qualitatively. The first point here is constructivism. Constructivist inquirers seek to understand contextualized meaning, to understand the meaningfulness of human actions and interactions as experienced and as construed by the actors in a given context. Constructivists try to find out what people really saw. They try and understand things from the perspective of those affected, not from the perspective of the planners, not from the perspective of the funders, but from the perspective of the people who were in the context that was being evaluated. Very, very important things. We go in as social welfare professionals, as social program implementers. We go in and we try and do a whole lot of things. We try and take our programs to the field. We try and take our programs we think about the best possible alternatives, but sitting in our plush offices, sitting in a different context, we may not know what is required by the people. And this is just going back to the example I gave you in the previous class. We did not know, as very bubbly, cheerful, very, very enthusiastic students, we had no idea about the problems the orphanage officials were facing in the orphanage. So, we went in and they said, well, fine, you're here. Thank you very much for coming. Please close your books. Please don't look at your plans. If you want to work here, we need your help with this particular thing. We don't want you to come and clean our orphanage. We have people. We said, okay, we'll clean your orphanage. No, nothing doing. We said, we'll do this. We'll design new activities. They said, first you let us take care of the old activities. Just help us relax. Just help us get a break for our meals. So that is what we did. And when we did that, they were able to do their job better, and ultimately the quality of service that the orphanage was giving to its beneficiaries, which is the children that were there, became very, very good, because people really had the time to do what they were hired to do. Okay, so that is what we mean. So constructivism tries to find out what is going on and tries to see things from the perspective of the beneficiaries. So going back to that example, the beneficiaries were the staff in that orphanage and the children in that orphanage, and both of them benefited because we were adaptable, because we changed our plans. Both parties benefited. Maybe the people who funded our effort did not. It was a self-funded thing, so it didn't really matter. Of course, there was an organization that organized these trips and that coordinated all the efforts, so I'm sure there was something, but it was a self-financed trip. And that was really, really good, because everybody ended up benefiting from that effort. Okay. Constructivism is the emotional, linguistic, symbolic, interactive, political dimensions of the social world, and their meaningfulness or lack thereof are all constructed by agentic human actors. These constructions are influenced by specific historical, geopolitical and cultural practices and discourses, and by the intentions, noble and otherwise, of those doing the constructing. So these constructions are multiple and plural, contingent and contextual. How we interpret a situation depends on all of these factors, on where we are coming from, what we have been trained to do, how we collect data, what we collect, what we throw out, where we assimilate data. And all of that is influenced by our stake in the process. Are we participants? Are we outsiders? Are we observers? Are we researchers getting all this information to write our PhDs? What do we want from understanding the situation? Where do we stand in that situation? So, and we realize constructivists say that everybody will have a different perspective of the same situation, and it's okay to have so many perspectives. Task of the constructivist social inquirer is to understand people's constructions of meanings in the context being studied, because it is these constructions that constitute social realities and underlie all human action. The task of the social inquirer is to understand how different people understand these realities within their context. And the inquirer constructs meanings of the people being studied, offer to the world they live in. That is, the inquirer's worldview becomes part of the construction and representation of meaning in any particular context. Inquirer bias, experience, expertise, and insight are all part of the meanings constructed. I am trying to understand what you have understood of my efforts. So, one level of understanding is your understanding as participant in the process. You express your understanding of the process that you are a part of. So, there are already these filters. You have taken something, you've left out something else. You take that. One is your experience. The next level is your expression. There is a gap between the two. What you want to tell me, what you really felt, what you want to tell me. And then above that is my reception of what you have told me, and that passes. You've told me something, but that also passes through my filters. How have I been trained to do my research? Or maybe it should be like this. So you're in a situation, you're passing something down, then you're expressing it, then I am receiving it, and then it is passing through my filters, and I am choosing to take something and throw out something else. I am ignoring something. So it is a meaning making of meanings that I have understood. You have made some sense of the situation you're in. As a participant, as a researcher, I am trying to make sense of your sense making of the situation, and that is what constructivism is. And we understand that in all of this, something may be lost, and that's okay. Inquirer bias comes in, experience comes in. How have I been trained to collect data? Where does my interest lie? Insight, what can I see? Can I see beyond what I am seeing? I am very bad at reading between lines. In normal human behavior, in research, I may be able to see beyond what is clearly written. Can I do that? And that only comes with experience, with practice. So that will then feed into the meanings that are constructed. Limitations of constructivist representation in social inquiry. The values are intertwined with knowing, as knowing is intertwined with being and acting. What I perceive to be right and wrong will affect whether I want to see it or not. There is a very famous case called the various cases on ethics that I've been teaching to my students. One is called Super Size Me. I don't know if you've heard about it. Super Size Me was a film made about the harmful effects of McDonald's burgers. So please look it up. This is not the time or place to discuss this. I'll just give you a very brief overview. So if I am very health conscious, I will already have a biased view when I read whatever people were saying. If I do not believe in, or if I have if I have suffered the negative effects of being addicted to fast food, I'll say yes, McDonald's is responsible for making people fat. On the other hand, if I am a true researcher, I will say, well, or if I have never tasted McDonald's in my life, I'll say, well, maybe it's making people fat, maybe it's not making people fat. I'll have to look at what is going on. I'll have to study both sides of the case. If I am a McDonald's employee, or if I am a big proponent of fast food chains, I will look at the same situation, I will watch that movie, I will read the case, and I will say, no, there is something else going on. So I am going to construct a different meaning. So our values, I'll say, well, McDonald's is not forcing you to eat its burgers. Don't eat them. If you don't like them, don't eat them. So our values, am I which side am I on, what I think is right, what I think is wrong. If I'm say an employee or a proponent, or even not really, I could be on a side where I could say that, well, it is not the fast food agency's responsibility to get you to eat something or not eat something. It is your responsibility as an individual. So my values will decide how I interpret a situation. Constructivism is value pluralistic. That is, different knowers holding different ideals and values can construct different meanings even in the same situation. Different values can exist in the same situation, and it's okay. We study these different values and then we present a case and we say this is how things happen. There's a problem of methodological criteria. That is always a problem with all qualitative research. Which method are you following? Is it sound? Will somebody be able to replicate it? Maybe, maybe not. Practice of evaluations conducted qualitatively. Evaluation practiced qualitatively is a narrative craft that involves the telling of stories. Stories about individuals and groups of people in their own complex and dynamic communities. Stories that enable understanding of what these communities share with others and what is unique to them. Stories with an explicit authorial signature. What the author feels about the story is reflected in the story. So stories with an explicit authorial signature, and stories with the aim of understanding and often action as the improvement of practice or the reframing of policy conversation toward the appreciation of pluralism and complexity. So these are stories. We are trying to enhance our understanding and promote the appreciation of pluralism, and we say, well, life is not a mathematical model. Life doesn't move in a straight direction. Life is not all plus and minus. A friend recently told me, you can't, so this friend told me that I cannot assess things. I don't have to know ahead of time what is going to happen. I get into a rickshaw and I get off at another place, and even if I fix up a rate with the rickshaw, the puller ahead of time, he will haggle with me after I get down. So life is never plus minus. Life is always changing, always adaptable. So we need to be adaptable because life is always changing, and we appreciate qualitative research. Indicates or promotes the appreciation of these stories that we write. Need to be written in such a way that different world views are built into these interpretations, and it is okay for that to happen. So that is what we need to structure our stories around. Okay. Evaluations at the telling of stories. Evaluators are likely to gain more comprehensive and in-depth program understanding by explicitly inviting dialogue around data from different methods and approaches. We need to understand what we have collected. We need to go through it. We need to make meaning out of it. So researchers make meaning out of the data, or the evaluators, program evaluators, especially program evaluators, need to find out what different things meant to different people, even within the same context, how different people evaluated or how different people understood the efforts of the program implementers and what they got out of it. And that can only be done by inviting dialogue around the data from various methods and approaches. So that will give it some robustness. The meaning will be more widely accepted if that is done. Excuse me. Implications for welfare reform. Instrumental cases are cases that are selected for their potential to provide insight into the overall reform initiative. These are instrumental cases. We go through these cases and we find out how the overall reform initiative really progressed, or what did it do for the community. What community characteristics might influence a program participant's sense of hopefulness or despair, connectedness or isolation, and then how are these feelings related to her or his program experience. So these are the welfare reform initiatives, or these are the implications. The qualitative research helps us find out how the reform progressed and how different characteristics of the community could have influenced what participants in that program felt about the program that was implemented. The role of the narrator evaluator in storytelling is an evaluator's own position in his or her work reflects both personal biography and political partnership. We've talked about this. The representation of reality, the presentation of meaning by an evaluator, by a qualitative researcher, will include the researcher's own sense of being and also the researcher's personal worldview, both who the evaluator is as an individual and as an evaluator, and whose interests she or he chooses to advance in the study, the reasons for the evaluation, etc. Commitment to pluralism and thus to representing the full array of perspectives, meanings in their stories for a comprehensive story, all are also needed. So the narrator evaluator needs to be committed to pluralism, needs to be cognizant of the fact that more than one worldview could exist and it's okay for things to be presented as they are. Accountability, they also need to be accountable for the difference the stories of evaluators make to the current situation and future directions. After all, what we present in the public domain will affect how people see themselves. You see the program being implemented in a certain way. The evaluators go out, find out what is happening from the field, come back and tell you that this is what we saw in the field, and then what they say will have an impact on how people see themselves. They will see, they will get a sense of how their efforts were being perceived. They will get a sense of what the people who interpreted from their situation interpreted, and then you'll say, this is not right. This should not have been perceived in a certain way. So that is what they deal with. That's what they need to be careful of. Okay. They also act as guides for the improvement of specific contextual practices. The stories that are presented are very helpful in that. The stories that are presented become opportunities for program learning and insight by diverse interested stakeholders. They become vehicles for reframing the large policy conversation. These qualitative narratives then finally feed into the policy reframing process, or they also feed into the conversations that are centered around policy making and reframing. They also make insistent demands to attend to the vital complexities, the legitimate pluralism, and the politics of power that constitute the fabric of contemporary social life. Life is not plus minus, it's not linear, it is very complex. Everything is constantly affecting everything else, and these discussions, these stories, these narratives enhance pluralism or enhance the attention to pluralism, and also highlight the politics of power that are constantly affecting these complexities in our social system. Some challenges of evaluation and storytelling. How do those who read and listen to the evaluator's story about the meaningfulness of state level welfare reform decide if it's a good story? Is it valid? Is it effective? How do we decide that? So the effectiveness is decided. How does the evaluator know where the boundaries of his or her advocacy lie? Where do we stop being evaluators and become proponents or become advocates for a particular situation? I may want to go in depth about a particular program implementation, and then I say, well, hold on. Am I talking from the perspective of the government? Am I saying, yes, this is how this program affected X, Y, Z, or I say, this is what the program did not do, or this is what it should do? So where do we stop being evaluators and start becoming advocates? That becomes a big challenge. How does he or she, as a qualitative evaluator, fairly and justly fulfill his or her responsibilities to those who have commissioned the evaluation, to the members of the setting studied, and to the larger citizenry, the collective good? We need to draw a line. We need to balance these roles. As an evaluator, as a person who is a representative of the funder, I need to say, yes, all the policies that were implemented were done well, because so that we don't ask for more money. If I'm a representative of the government, I need to say, yes, the government has done a fabulous job. If I'm a beneficiary who has somehow missed the boat, I'm supposed to also look at their interest and say, no, there wasn't enough for everybody. So where do I draw the line? There has to be a balance. And if we talk more about, or if one aspect of the evaluation is given more emphasis, then the other part gets left out. So there has to be a balance. There has to be some amount of objectivity as far as possible. And then you'll say, well, you just said that everybody's personal opinions come in. They do, but that is where our expertise, that is where our hard work as evaluators lies. When we evaluate social programs, we have to learn to be involved with the program and also distant from the program, and balance this distance and involvement. Whose interests are advanced when the evaluator judges the particular state's approach to the welfare reform to be an effective one, but welfare reform itself to be misguided policy direction? Too many stakeholders, often with conflicting interests, need to be catered to. So how do we evaluate the program or policy in light of the conflicting interests of the stakeholders? How do we prioritize which stakeholder is more important? Who do we need to attend to? How do we set those priorities, and how do we balance it is always a challenge. Okay. Present day connections to the important evaluation theories. The program theory gives guidance to the evaluator about where to look and what to find out. The mere construction of a program theory can expose naive and simplistic expectations. The theory can be a learning tool long before the evaluation begins. So evaluation theories can give us some insight. They can help us guide our evaluations. They can show, a theory can help us develop insights into the program before it is implemented, so we save on money, time, energy. Once the data are in hand, the analysis assesses how well the theory describes what actually happened, and so we tie it in with the theory and we say, well, the theory came out of the ground, it came out of practical life. Is it valid? Is it not? What is more applicable here? This is important information for the directors and staff of the program under study, so they can rethink the understandings and replan the activities that did not work out as anticipated. Theory-based evaluation also provides explanations, stories of means and ends that communicate readily to policymakers and the public. They also help They also help explain the cause and effect relationship. They also, not really in a very plus and minus term, but in terms of whether what we started with actually became beneficial or not. And so they try and speak to both ends of the spectrum, people who planned the program and people who benefited from it or who were affected by it. Evaluating with stakeholder engagement. Participatory and collaborative approaches to evaluation work best. Contextual situatedness is always very helpful when we talk about when stakeholders are engaged with the evaluation process. These are the benefits. The first is the evaluation becomes a participatory and collaborative process, so everybody gets to participate in it and they can provide their perspectives. The evaluation can be situated contextually. We know where we are which perspective we are evaluating the program or policy from. Then the inclusion, everybody gets to be included. The challenge here is the process of conducting the evaluation becomes a challenge. The ways in which stakeholders are involved need to be decided. Which particular stakeholders participate? Stakeholders with conflicting interests may not be such a good idea, but how do you choose which stakeholders to take and which not to take? How less powerful voices can be fairly heard, and who speaks with and who speaks for and with whom? And that is all we have time for in this lecture. Thank you very much for listening. So there's a lot of things that we can discuss in this, but I told you right in the beginning, the idea is to plant ideas in your mind and stimulate you to go out in new directions and see what is happening, and then come back and read up and maybe develop further interest in this whole area. So thank you very much for listening. We will try and wind up the discussion in the next 1 or 2 lectures. Thank you.